Story 1. I'm posting this for a friend of mine. My buddy is a very good surgeon and has dedicated his life to medicine. He frequently goes to hotspots around the world to offer his services. He spent time in Syria, in Iraq during the war, in Africa, after the September 11th attacks and the Boston bombing. He got in his car and offered his help at hospitals there. He is unmarried, and the only thing he does for himself is he takes 3 or 4 weeks off twice a year. Once in July and once in December. He told me he does this so he doesn't lose his mind. On those times he really lets loose. He'll go on vacation somewhere, maybe take up a hobby, go skydiving, scuba diving, meet women, eat wild food, and at Christmas he spends time with his brother's family and apparently gives some pretty nice gifts. He's as good of a person as you could ever hope to meet, and an excellent surgeon. Without giving too much away, before COVID, at his hospital they had a pretty busy day, which at a hospital is never a good thing. He was doing one emergency surgery after another. Everyone was slammed and more people were waiting for emergency care. One person had already died because of the backlog, and a few more on the operating table. No matter how good the surgeon is, sometimes you simply can't save people. In the midst of all this chaos, the entitled mother walks into the emergency room and begins demanding that someone see her misbehaving child who had a bruise on his face because another kid punched him at school, probably for being difficult. The secretary managed to get her to wait in the waiting room, with all the people waiting to see if their loved ones were okay. Her child went and apparently decided that he was the only one allowed to play with the hospital waiting room toys and would scream at any other kids who tried to approach. Our hero doctor, meanwhile, is fighting for the life of a 16-year-old who was in a car accident, no idea if it was his fault or not. It didn't matter, and sadly the kid didn't make it. I always feel this is the worst thing for a surgeon. They try their best, but sometimes it's not good enough. He has to get his own emotions in check before going to face the parents. They have a special room for this in the hospital. It has comfortable furniture and a table that is nailed down. He is in the middle of breaking this awful news to parents who are feeling a pain that words are too cheap to describe, when in bursts the entitled mother. Apparently she followed the parents as they were escorted to the room. She looked around and said, "When you are done taking a break, my son needs." Doctor shoves her out and calls security. He finishes talking to the parents, then goes to the waiting room. Secretary filled him in. He asks the mother, who had been berating the secretary ever since being so rudely treated by the doctor, which child was hers. He went over to the child, and in the waiting room, to give the child a quick look over, declares he doesn't have a concussion and tells the mother to get out of my hospital before I call the police. Entitled mother, I demand you. Hero doctor, no, I have patients that need me much more than you. Your child is fine, you just need to raise him better, get out. He had security escort her and her child all the way to her car to ensure that she left. This is a guy who I have never seen get angry. He got robbed in Ibiza, losing his wallet, all his credit cards, IDs, and his passport, and shrugged it off, saying he already canceled the card, put an alert for the IDs, and the most the robber got was about €50 and a nice wallet. But when he told me this story, he was shaking with rage. Story 2. Buckle up and listen closely, folks, because this is going to be a long one. At my previous job, a new manager came in like a whirlwind, enforcing a strict policy on client communications. Every interaction had to go through him, no exceptions. His reasoning? To maintain a unified message and prevent any potential disruptions. The atmosphere quickly became oppressive, filled with unspoken fears. Creativity was stifled, and the vibrant workplace we once knew morphed into a realm of dread. I was in charge of a critical project for a major client, Zeiss Corporation, which brought in a staggering $2 million annually, around 15% of our total revenue. They had raised serious concerns about our approach, particularly regarding the timeline and quality of the deliverables. I felt an intense pressure to address these issues, but the fear of crossing my manager was paralyzing. There were whispers throughout the office about his readiness to scapegoat anyone who disobeyed his orders. In a moment of misguided compliance, I submitted a detailed report to my manager, outlining the client's concerns, hoping he'd grasp the severity of the situation. Instead, he brushed it off, insisting that the client's worries were unfounded. He assured me we were on track, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary, and even mocked the idea that a client could challenge our expertise. As days turned into weeks, the client's frustration only grew. My coworkers and I felt the mounting pressure from Zeiss Corporation. The project felt like a sinking ship, and my anxiety hit a breaking point. I started staying late, poring over data and client feedback, desperately trying to find a way to resolve the issues without stepping on my manager's toes. Yet, each day felt like a countdown to disaster. Finally, in an act of desperation, I reached out to the client directly. I carefully crafted an email, sharing my insights and assuring them that their feedback would be taken seriously. I emphasized our commitment to the partnership, fully aware that I was risking my job. What happened next was a disaster. My manager discovered my email and exploded in anger, his fury echoing through the office. He stormed into the conference room, calling an emergency meeting with the entire team. In front of everyone, he publicly humiliated me, shouting about disloyalty and insubordination. His face turned red, and I could see the veins in his neck bulging as he berated me. The tension in the room was unbearable as he escalated the issue to upper management and human resources, demanding severe consequences. The fallout was swift and devastating. Just 3 days later, Zeiss Corporation announced they were terminating our contract, citing a complete lack of professionalism and coordination. The decision sent shockwaves throughout the company, and I could feel the collective gasp of my coworkers as the news spread. This loss meant a staggering $2 million drop in our projected annual revenue, leaving the finance team scrambling to adjust budgets and forecasts. The impact was immediate and brutal. Budget cuts were enacted within hours, slashing project funding by a shocking 50%. Within a month, the company laid off an astounding 30% of the workforce, leaving many talented employees' friends I had worked with for years scrambling for new jobs in an increasingly competitive market. The atmosphere was thick with fear and resentment as more of my colleagues found themselves on the chopping block. To make matters worse, my manager shifted all the blame onto me, painting me as the sole reason for this catastrophe. I was put on probation and subjected to humiliating weekly performance reviews that felt more like public shaming than constructive feedback. Human Resources was brought in to manage the fallout, but instead of mediating the situation, they sided with my manager, branding me as the rogue employee who had jeopardized the company's future. My reputation was in ruins, and the colleagues who had once respected me now viewed me with suspicion, afraid they might be next. One evening, as I sat alone in my empty office, staring blankly at the flickering fluorescent lights, I received an email from the client that sent chills down my spine. It was an ultimatum. If we didn't address their concerns within 48 hours, they would terminate the contract and share their negative experience with other potential clients, a public relations disaster that could cripple our company. My heart raced as I realized the gravity of the situation. Could I save both my career and the company's reputation in the span of 2 days? In that moment of desperation, I decided to turn compliance on its head. I put together a meticulously detailed report, highlighting not only the client's concerns but also my manager's previous dismissals of critical feedback. I copied Human Resources on the email, ensuring they were fully aware of the escalating situation and my earlier attempts to communicate directly. This wasn't just compliance, it was strategic transparency. I didn't hold back. I laid out the consequences of ignoring the client and proposed a full team meeting, with the client present, to address their concerns head-on. I knew the risk of retaliation from my manager was high, but I also understood that the company needed accountability. What followed was a dramatic confrontation. My manager was blindsided when the email chain reached upper management, and Human Resources was forced to step in. They called an emergency meeting with the client, and the outcome was shocking. Not only did we manage to salvage the relationship, but we also secured an additional $500,000 in funding as a goodwill gesture to address the issues. In the end, my compliance with the policy led to an unexpected twist. While my manager initially tried to downplay my actions, the tide began to turn. I was praised for my initiative in addressing the client's concerns transparently, while my manager was reprimanded for his oppressive policies. Human resources finally had to revamp their approach to communication within the company. So, sometimes strategic compliance can work in your favor, especially when it sheds light on toxic practices. In a stifling environment, it's important to weigh the potential consequences of your actions and find a way to uphold integrity even when the odds are stacked against you. Story 3. So, my girlfriend 19 and I 19 decided to throw a late Halloween party for several of her college friends and a few of my rural buddies. The party was bring your own drinks, since both my girlfriend and I are underage, but it wasn't an alcohol-free event as some of our friends were 21. However, everyone was under strict instructions not to give alcohol to anyone underage. I run a tight ship. Now for the drama. An entitled girl, Hannah, arrived with her equally entitled brother, Max, uninvited. Neither my girlfriend nor I knew her well, but to keep the party going, we decided to let her stay. For most of the night, things were fine. She tried hooking up with people and attempting to mooch drinks and cigarettes, but wasn't very successful and didn't cause much trouble. Her brother, however, was a different story. He kept hitting on my girlfriend, as she doesn't look as old as she is, and I spent most of the night telling him to back off. He seemed to think he was really something, and kept acting like he could seduce my girlfriend with his flexing and inappropriate comments. Spoiler alert, it did nothing but irritate me and annoy my girlfriend. Now, here's where things escalated. I got off the dance floor with my girlfriend, and she wandered off to get some drinks. That's when Max approached me, looking irritated. "Max, what's your deal, jerk?" Me, "What?" "Max, what's your deal? I'm trying to get with that girl, and you keep blocking me." Me, "As I've told you before, she's my girlfriend, and she's not interested in a minor." Max, "Yeah, right? You're not dating her. You're just saying that to stop me so you can have her to yourself." He got right in my face, and I could clearly smell the alcohol on him. Me, "Have you been drinking? Who gave you alcohol?" Max, "None of your business," he said smugly as he walked off. Now I was concerned that I could get in trouble for having a minor drinking at my party, so I started walking around, trying to figure out who gave him the booze. I was halfway through checking with the people who had brought alcohol when I heard the unmistakable sound of my girlfriend yelling, "Leave me alone." I ran over and saw her, all 5 feet of her, in a circle of people, looking angry and scared. Max, who's about 5'9", stood there slurring his words. Me, "What the heck is going on?" Girlfriend, he just grabbed my arm and tried to pull me away, saying something about showing me a good time. Max, slurring heavily, "What's your problem, man? I was just trying to get to know her and have some fun." Me, "I don't care what you were trying to do. You need to leave right now." Hannah showed up then. "What? Why?" Me, "Your brother is drunk, and he's harassing my girlfriend. I don't even know how he got alcohol. Now, I've been patient, but both of you need to leave now." Max, "Don't talk to her like that," he said, stepping closer to me. Me, "You both need to leave, or I'm calling the police. And if you keep getting closer, you'll regret it." Not my finest moment, but I was stressed, and he was right in my face, drunk. As soon as I mentioned the police, they both bolted, cursing at me as they left. It turned out that Hannah had been doing inappropriate favors for alcohol and sharing it with her little brother. The party pretty much ended after that, and everyone left. I was beyond frustrated. Edit. For everyone commenting about my mention of a firearm, please understand that more people in the US die in fistfights than from rifles or shotguns. Secondly, not everyone has the luxury of a calm life. I was addicted to weed and alcohol from age 14 to 18. My area has more drug rehab centers than restaurants. This is, sadly, a typical day in my county. Story 4. I, 33 female, am going to preface this by saying my 6-year-old daughter's father, 37M, I'm gonna call him Jeff, has never been my romantic partner. We had a one-night stand. I don't like people calling him my ex, since it makes it seem we had some kind of emotional attachment. He was never involved after I told him I was pregnant, and actually wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. But I decided to raise my child alone since I have enough money to raise her without child support. For the whole pregnancy and the first 4 years, Jeff was not in the picture. On my mother's recommendation, I did send him pictures and invited him to special events, but he always replied he had no interest in my daughter. 2 years ago, he reappeared and began demanding parental rights. When I didn't do what he wanted, he sued and was told no, he was not getting parental rights. He was given the offer to pay child support, and then we can revisit giving him actual rights, but he has refused. He has the money, much more than me, but he refuses. I still offered to let him see my daughter in a casual manner, no child support needed, with the agreement anything legal, medical, or educational will not involve him. He pushed the boundaries and we had a fallout. After that, we didn't hear from him for almost 6 weeks before he called to meet for Christmas. After much discussion, I agreed to bring my daughter over on the condition my daughter's godparents could come. Thus we went over for Christmas dinner, and finding out Jeff is married and had never told his family he had a child. It was great to be judged by a bunch of strangers. It was uncomfortable the whole time. I'm going to use fake names, but let's say my daughter's name is Katie. His wife kept calling my daughter Gabrielle. Not the actual name she used, but it was that different to my daughter's name. The wife was also very physical, trying to pick up my daughter or parent her. I would block her or tell her to please let me deal with my child. The whole time she pretty much ignored me, but Katie didn't seem nervous, so I decided to just bide my time. I hit my limit when my daughter said she needed the bathroom, and this stranger went, "Oh, Gaby, you need potty? Let mommy change you." My daughter hasn't worn diapers in a while now, and she's more than capable of going alone to the bathroom. I immediately told her to stay away from my daughter and that we were leaving. The woman started wailing that I was kidnapping her baby girl and tried to lunge at me. Her in-laws got in the middle and held her, consoling her and saying that we weren't leaving, and for her to calm down like she was the victim. At that point, I just glared at Jeff and told him he better explain or I would be calling the police. He asked me to speak in private in another room and that I could just leave my daughter with his parents. No way that would ever happen. Katie's godparents took her with them despite the wife having a full meltdown. Jeff and I spoke outside, and he explained that he and his wife recently lost a daughter. I'm not going to give specific details on that. All I'll say, it was sudden and nobody's fault. And as I can only imagine, it had caused some psychological issues to his wife. Apparently, he had the brilliant idea that having Katie pass as their lost child would help his wife, without telling me. And that's why he wanted visitations and parental rights. He pleaded for me to leave my daughter with him for a little bit. I asked him what was his plan when his wife heals. His response was disgusting. "Well, I'll just send Katie back with you, and it will be just like before." I told him he was insane if he thought I would let him use my daughter like that. What his wife needs is therapy with a professional, not feeding her delusions, and I would not let that woman within miles from my daughter. He told me I was being cruel and didn't know the pain of losing a child. I agreed with him, but reminded Jeff that my priority is not his family, it's my child. What he and his family do to work through their grief has nothing to do with us. I also told him to call his lawyer because I am making sure he never has contact with my child. So that's what I'm bracing for. He's been blasting my phone since Christmas, but I can easily ignore him. My daughter and I are doing a small travel vacation. This isn't an update, just something I feel needs to be said. My daughter is set for life monetarily. She has a trust, and I make really good money in my position. If she was 18 right now, I could put her through college without a loan. She doesn't need child support for quality of life. If I could get child support and never worry about her father trying something, I would be suing him in a heartbeat. But after talking to a lawyer and realizing the risk, I've taken the decision that child support or possible inheritance is not worth my child's safety. Safety is always first. January 6, 2024. Hey everyone. Happy New Year's. This isn't so much a real update as just letting people know we are home and safe. My daughter is spending the rest of her vacation with her godparents on another trip while I work on things. Moving might be something I'll be looking into, though that is a long-term plan considering all it takes. I won't share too many details on what my lawyer is going to be doing, but we are absolutely going to push for an RO. I might not post for some time, at least not until things settled. I do appreciate all the support and good advice. I'm taking a lot of it into account as I plan how to move forward. Story 5. A few years ago, I was a department manager for a large conference center. I ran the top-performing department as determined by guest feedback surveys by a large margin. Like, no other department out of 1,200 employees was even close, and my dress style was always nice and professional. The dress code didn't say we needed to have on button-up shirts and ties, but I did it anyway because I looked great and professional, and I met with the leaders of large conferences multiple times per day. I dressed to impress. They were my clients, and whatever their problem was, I was going to fix it. My demeanor and professional attire did great things to alleviate their concerns. My bosses got on a dress code kick for some reason. They made me and my small department, 6 people total, start wearing lame, colorful, standardized shirts with a logo on front. The rationale was that the clients should be able to identify me as a staff member. I get the logic, but that was what my lanyard and name badge were for. Plus, the bright, colorful dress code shirt was actually detrimental to my work, as I often worked backstage as a tech during band performances. Industry standard color for techs is black. But they wanted me to wear bright yellow. Okay. I tell them my concerns about my shirt's bright colors being a distraction for the audience as I do work backstage. But my bosses don't care. They made up a new dress code and want me to follow it. Fine. So I wear the shirt. But then I also wear a nice sweater vest on top of it. Still got my tie on. I like ties. But, to make it explicitly clear I'm staff, I get my own hat made at my own expense too that shows the company's name on it. Again, my badge and lanyard are always visible. But now, I can do my backstage work without being a distraction to the audience that might glimpse my movement as I go about doing scene changes, etc. But then my bosses tell me that the company's logo has to be visible on my shirt, and I, therefore, can't wear a vest. So then I get the company's logo embroidered on my shirt sleeve, also at personal expense. Problem solved, right? I'm wearing the shirt they gave me, and the company's logo is visible. At this point, my boss is upset at me and is trying to write me up for any possible infringement of company policies. I know how to read a room, and I immediately start going to the Human Resources Director to approve my new and evolving malicious compliance with this ever-changing dress code policy. My boss says that we can't wear hats. Okay, fine. My hair is visible for all to see, and I quickly become aware of the next thing my bosses are going to tell me to fix. My hair. They're going to cite some vague language in the employee handbook about hair length. So I go to the Human Resources Director preemptively and ask for clarification for hair length. After a 10-minute conversation, we both agree that I am perfectly fine with nothing to worry about. My hair is nice, in a bun, and looks good. It's well kept and stylish, and my specific clientele actually really like it because they're mostly hipsters anyway. But my bosses don't see it that way. They say that my hair is too long and needs to be cut. I ask them how long is too long. I am, after all, a rule follower and will obey the rules. One of my bosses, a woman with long hair that is actually against dress code because it's not put up into a bun, says that my hair should be less than shoulder length. My hair was in a man bun. I ask her if that policy extends to women as well. She says no, obviously, that this dress code only applies to men. Apologetically and feigning ignorance, I ask her to show me where it says that in the employee handbook. She shows me the section. the section where it says that if the hair is longer than shoulder length regardless of gender, it should be kept in a bun. I tell her that my hair is in a bun, as opposed to hers. Oh man, now it's getting real. I just called them out. They're not happy. My other boss, a guy with super short hair, less than 1/4 of an inch long, tells me that as a guy, my hair shouldn't touch my shirt's collar. He tells me that a few stray hairs of mine are touching my collar. I pull out my phone and take a picture of him. I show him that even his 1/4 inch's hair is touching the collar. His head was leaned back, and his hair was touching his collar. I then ask them again to clarify how long is too long, because his 1/4 inch's hair is too long for their standards. Side note, I love my thick hair. Someone telling me to cut it arbitrarily speaks fighting words. Then they tell me that I just need to do what I'm told because it's the company policy, and if I don't do it, they'll get human resources involved. I tell them I already got human resources involved, and the human resources director explicitly told me that my hair was perfectly fine. But these two bosses of mine just wouldn't let it go. They had to go after my hair. They told me that since I'm a manager and meet with group leaders, I have to go above and beyond what the dress code says, and I have to act professional in order for us to receive good guest feedback regarding professionalism. I tell them that my department and I are already the most professional and highest rated department according to guest feedback surveys. I take the printout of the survey results out of my bag because I anticipated my lack of professionalism was going to be questioned and had it printed in advance. And I show them the survey. They read it, toss the paper aside, and tell me to cut my hair or be written up. Fine. The next day, I came into work with a shaved head. They never told me to cut my hair again because I look far worse with no hair. Coincidentally, they also let me wear my hat again, haha, but only because my shaved head was a sore sight. As a point of interest, when I resigned from my position a year later, I submitted to Human Resources my 80-point paper on why my two bosses caused me to leave the organization, how they stifled me and my department from doing legitimately good and quality work, and how I felt that under their leadership, I was incapable of ever winning. A month after I left, I heard from a friend and previous coworker who was still at the company that my direct boss was forced to retire, and my other boss was fired. My friend told me that they were privy to a conversation held between the chief executive officer and my female boss, the one who was fired, and my friend overheard the chief executive officer say, "Your time here at this company is over, and I want you to know that when you're gone, your position will not be filled. Consider you and your position eliminated." Lastly, I haven't cut my hair since I left apart from occasional trims. It's now almost 3 feet long, and I plan on giving my gorgeous lion's mane away to some charity that deals with making wigs for kids. Story 6. This happened back in 2020 when my family and I were in the process of buying a house. This eventually led to us purchasing a newly built home. I had initially wanted to buy an existing home because my dad has been in construction and general contracting my entire life, and my grandfather built houses for a living. I thought it would be a great experience to have with my dad. However, too many people had watched home renovation shows during the COVID-19 pandemic and decided they knew how to remodel a house. Spoiler, they didn't. My dad and I agreed that we weren't going to pay a fortune for a house that needed to be remodeled from its previous remodel. This will be important for later stories. For the sake of this story, I'll call my son James, my dad Harry, the landlord Useless, and the entitled roommate Eb for entitled Brett. While looking for a temporary place, we needed to find something furnished because I was moving from a neighboring state, and my father was moving from one in another direction. We knew we were buying, so we agreed we wanted new furniture. We had always bought second-hand, and when I was a kid living with my dad, we never had anything new. So, we felt like we deserved it. We found what seemed to be an amazing mansion from the mob era, with all the rich people mansion-style outdoor amenities. Since we only planned to be there for 3 months tops, we thought this would be great for my then 4th grader. When we first moved in, we were told that there were only 2 other people living there, and they lived upstairs, while we would be occupying the 3 bedrooms downstairs. There were 2 exterior rooms that had doors into the main living area and a 3rd bedroom down the hall, which couldn't be accessed unless you went through one of the other 2 rooms. There was also a bathroom at the end of the hall. That arrangement didn't last more than 3 weeks, but that's a story for another time. We didn't meet the other people during the first couple of days. On the 3rd day, we met Eb. The first thing you notice about her is that she absolutely smelled like she'd slept in a trash bag full of stale cigarette butts. Other than that, she was ridiculously pleasant. She kindly showed my son where all the basketballs and outdoor toys were, as well as giving me a tour of the kitchen. We had typical new roommate small talk. Since she was more than 25 years older than me, it was a bit awkward, but that was that for a few days. Fast forward a few days, and I start to notice the smell of stale cigarette smoke. I brushed it off, knowing that Useless, who had a private mother-in-law suite off the living room, with access only from outside, and Eb both smoked. Sometimes they smoked out back by the pool or near the back garage door, so I figured they had just smoked too close to the door and hadn't waited long enough before coming inside. I shrugged it off. The next day, while walking to the kitchen to get my coffee, I see Eb standing on the landing upstairs, smoking. She had no shame whatsoever, even though there was a no smoking sign just 2 feet from her head. Now, I'm a non-confrontational person if I can avoid it, plus, when my protective mama bear mode kicks in, it even scares me. So, I said nothing, grabbed my coffee, and went back to my room to call my father. Harry was furious. He's a former smoker and one of those types who, after quitting, can't stand the smell of cigarettes. He called Useless, and I was assured it wouldn't happen again. But, joke's on me, it would keep happening repeatedly. Everything seemed fine the next day until I was in the kitchen making dinner. Suddenly, Eb comes screeching into the kitchen like a deranged and possessed pterodactyl. She started laying into me, and I'll never forget the words she said, which were actually pretty hilarious. She yelled, "You entitled, self-centered princess, who do you think you are?" I just stared at her like a deer in the headlights, totally confused. I asked her what she was talking about. For the next 10 minutes, she switched between screaming and screeching about how unfair it was that she had to smoke outside just because my dumb kid was in the house now. Internally, I was furious, but I couldn't leave because I was cooking something that couldn't be left unattended and had to be constantly stirred. I tried my best to ignore her, but eventually, I got annoyed and picked up my phone to call Harry. At that moment, Eb screeched, "Of course, the girl who can't live without daddy paying her bills is going to cry to daddy." At that point, I lost it. I put my phone in my pocket, picked up the pan, and walked past her into my room. Don't worry, dear readers, the food was nearly done, so I could finish it off the heat. Not 5 minutes later, there was a loud, firm, and insistent knock on my door. Useless was standing there, fuming. He started raging at me about cooking in the rooms, as one of the house rules was that no one was allowed to cook in the rooms. I asked him, "Who's cooking?" He pointed angrily at the pan in my hand. So, I looked at him and said, "Oh, that. I just decided to bring my child his dinner in his room, so he didn't have to listen to the irate banshee blaming him for why she can't smoke inside, even though you have no smoking signs plastered in nearly every room of the house." He stared at me for a minute, then just huffed and walked away. Nothing was said over the next couple of days. I barely saw Eb, and when I did, she was at least quiet, so I thought that was the end of it. But, of course, I was wrong. One morning, I went to take a shower. I'm a late shower taker because I like to have my coffee and take the dog for a walk beforehand. It was probably around 10:30 or 11 in the morning. It was already warm in the bathroom, so I opened the small window above the mirror. A few minutes into my shower, I again smelled smoke inside the house. This time was different, though. I decided to get out of the shower long enough to ask my son to call Harry and let him know it was happening again. As I was stepping out of the shower, at that exact moment, Eb stuck her lips up to the screen of the bathroom window, and a cloud of smoke followed. She was standing on the garden hose storage box. Thankfully, my son hates putting his head under the shower head, so we keep a cup in the shower for rinsing. I filled it with water and tossed it out the window. Her shrill gasp was music to my ears. There are tons more crazy entitled stories about this woman. And before anyone asks, finding a furnished space for 3 people and a small dog at a reasonable price in a major tourist area in the United States was nearly impossible, so unfortunately, we had to deal with it.